Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going straight into the real life effects of a truly devastating event. We're focusing on the civilians caught up in the aftermath.
Yes, we're looking at the consequences of that terrible terrorist attack in Pahalgam, in Indian-administered Kashmir, back on April 22nd, 2025.
Exactly. Our sources really lay bare the immediate human cost, but also the ripple effects, the escalating tensions for ordinary people in both India and Pakistan.
And the attack itself, it happened in the Baisaran Valley, which is, well, it's a spot very popular with tourists.
Tragically so. It claimed 26 lives, mostly Indian tourists, and left over 20 injured. A horrific toll.
And the group claiming responsibility, the Resistance Front, it's understood they're an offshoot of Lashkar-e-Taiba.
Right, a known militant organization operating in the region.
What's immediately striking, I think, is just how direct and brutal the impact was on individuals. The sources, they detail how the gunmen specifically went after the men.
Asking them to recite religious verses, is that right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. While the women were apparently spared.
Yeah.
It's a chilling detail, really highlights the calculated nature of it, the intended psychological blow.
Absolutely. And the personal stories. They're just heartbreaking. We read that eyewitness account from Arathi Saraths.
Who saw her own father killed. It's unimaginable.
And these victims, they weren't just abstract numbers. They were people from all over India, Odisha, Maharashtra, families just shattered.
That case of Sushil Nasanil from Indore, too. As a Christian, being asked to recite an Islamic verse and then being killed, it just sends shockwaves, doesn't it?
It really does. There's so many different communities creating fear far beyond just the immediate families.
The immediate reaction across India was, well, this profound wave of grief. You saw it everywhere.
Emotional funerals described in our sources happening nationwide. A real testament to that shared sense of loss, I think.
And that loss, understandably, it fueled public reactions. Protests erupted.
Not just in India either, right? Srinagar, Delhi, Hyderabad.
But also internationally. There was one outside the Pakistani High Commission in London, for instance. Widespread condemnation.
Though it's important, I feel, to mention the solidarity, too. Like local Kashmiris, Omar Nazir Tibet Bakwan was mentioned.
Offering support, yes. Emphasizing this violence doesn't represent everyone in Kashmir. Those voices are so crucial.
Definitely. But the sources also point to a worrying undercurrent, don't they? This emergence of fear and, well, anti-Muslim sentiment in some areas.
Yes, the Delhi protests were cited as an example. It raises real concerns about, worsening communal tensions because of this.
And you also saw the disruption to daily life, the economic side. Markets in Chandni Chowk shutting down.
Traders in Haryana mourning. Actions like that, they show how deeply this resonated, impacting business, too.
Okay, so shifting focus a bit, let's talk about Kashmir itself, on the ground. The economic, the social impact there.
Right. Because Pahalgam, as the sources remind us, it's hugely reliant on tourism. It's the lifeblood of that area.
They call it the mini Switzerland of India, don't they? That tells you how key it is for travelers.
Exactly. So an attack like this, it's immediately devastating for livelihoods. You're talking hoteliers, guides.
Pony riders, shopkeepers, everyone.
Imagine running a small guest house, totally dependent on that summer season. This happening so early, it could just wreck your entire year's income.
And we saw specific examples, didn't we? Over 500 tourists from just Maharashtra leaving right after.
Hotel bookings just plummeting. These aren't abstract numbers. This is lost income, potential bankruptcies, huge uncertainty for people already facing hardship.
And that story about the local guide having to use horses to transport the wounded.
Yeah, it really highlights the infrastructure challenges, doesn't it? How quickly things get overwhelmed, affecting aid delivery.
Plus the upcoming Amarnath Yatra pilgrimage. There's uncertainty around that now, too.
Increased security, which is understandable, but it can also deter visitors, adding another layer of economic damage and anxiety.
It's just, Kashmiri civilians have already lived through decades of conflict. This is another massive blow to economic stability, to their daily lives.
And the impact, it definitely crossed borders. Civilians in Pakistan started facing consequences, too.
India's reaction was swift, closing the Wagah-Attari border, revoking visas.
Which directly hits people traveling back and forth for all kinds of reasons, family, business.
Yeah, the sources mention 191 Pakistani nationals had to leave India via Attari on April 25th alone.
And that Pakistani woman quoted, she'd come for a wedding. Her frustration, feeling punished for something she had zero connection to. It's poignant. It shows the unfairness.
And it went both ways. 287 Indian nationals returned from Pakistan, too.
Beyond the border itself, Pakistan closing its airspace to Indian flights that had knock-on effects.
Right. Longer routes for airlines like Air India, Indigo.
Which means higher costs for them, and eventually that often gets passed down to passengers.
So even people not directly involved in crossing the border might end up paying more for flights?
Exactly. It's that ripple effect again. Ordinary Pakistanis, just like Indians, facing real consequences from this conflict, even though they weren't involved at all.
The sources also flag the escalation at the border itself, the line of control, exchanges of fire.
On April 25th, and then a reported Pakistani ceasefire violation the next day. That's incredibly worrying for the communities living right there.
Imagine living with that constant threat literally on your doorstep.
The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, appealed for restraint, which shows the level of international concern.
And then there's the whole Indus Waters Treaty issue. India suspended parts of it.
Yes, and Pakistan reacted very strongly, calling it an act of war. That raises the frightening possibility of water conflicts.
Which would be devastating for civilians, wouldn't it? Especially farmers in Pakistan relying on that water.
Absolutely. Livelihoods, food security, all threatened.
And we can't ignore that practice, reported on both sides, of demolishing homes of suspected militants.
A drastic measure. It inevitably displaces whole families, innocent people often, adding another layer to the human cost, uprooting lives.
And looming over everything, always, is the fear of nuclear escalation.
It's a constant background anxiety for civilians on both sides, profoundly affecting their sense of safety.
So let's step back for a critical look. The Resistance Front's stated motive: resisting demographic change in Kashmir.
Yes, which our sources explicitly link to India's revocation of Article 370, the special status Kashmir previously had. Understanding that context is, well, it's important.
But targeting civilians as a tactic.
It has to be critiqued, surely. It's counterproductive. It alienates people, even those whose cause they might claim to support. Historically, this kind of violence just breeds more suffering for ordinary people.
And on the other side, the risk that India's response, even if meant to be strong, could unintentionally fuel that anti-Muslim sentiment we talked about.
It's a very real danger. The protests we saw are maybe a warning sign of that potential division.
Then you have Pakistan's denial, the false flag claim, adds complexity.
It does. While their direct role here isn't confirmed, you can't ignore the historical context, the allegations of past support for militant groups. It clouds the picture.
But ultimately, through all this complexity, who's caught in the middle?
It's the civilians, always. Kashmiris facing economic ruin and instability, grieving families across India, Pakistanis dealing with border closures and diplomatic fallout. They bear the heaviest burden.
Their daily lives are the ones most profoundly impacted by all this.
And you often see pressure from, let's call it the establishment narratives on both sides, demanding strong action, right? Retaliation.
Yeah, it's a common theme.
But we have to keep asking, what's the real cost of that action? Who pays a price? Are civilian lives genuinely being prioritized in these calculations?
It's a crucial question. This deep dive, I think, really shows this tangled web of grief, fear, uncertainty spreading out from Pahalgam, affecting civilians across both countries.
Yeah. And as the official responses escalate, it just becomes clearer and clearer that everyday people, the ones far from power, they're the ones paying the highest price. Safety, livelihood, peace of mind, gone.
So it leaves us with that fundamental question, doesn't it? What can actually be done? What meaningful steps could break this cycle of violence and start genuinely prioritizing civilian lives in this incredibly troubled region?
It's a huge question, and maybe there are no easy answers.
No, probably not. But it's one that needs our sustained attention, our critical thought. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive today. We really hope you'll reflect on this. Subscribe if you want more analysis like this. Share your thoughts. Let us know what you think could help protect civilians caught in these situations.
And maybe, as a next step for you, consider looking into the psychological side of things. The long-term trauma of living through prolonged conflict, but also the resilience people show. It adds another vital layer to understanding the human dimension here.